Good afternoon, and welcome to Daily Caffeine with Carter and Keri. Carter almost did a spit take. I can see him. I don't know why. Anyway, today's fun.
Why is it funny that you? I don't know. You and I were laughing beforehand. I don't know why. It was just funny.
Sometimes the openings are just fun.
I just had to laugh. I don't know what it was.
I want to do because we'll be talking about something that's like, good afternoon. Welcome to Daily Caffeine with Carter and Keri. Today is Monday, November 18th, and we want to say thank you to everyone who participated in book club last night. It was a lot of fun. We discussed Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. I can never get Greg's last name right. Anyway, we discussed Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind. And if you guys haven't seen it, there's a video of it, and we had a lot of great people participating, and it was very enjoyable. We'll be deciding on the next book soon.
Yes, which I'm hoping is going to be fiction of some kind, but I could get overruled. We'll see. Madness of Crowds is definitely on the list of something we want to do. I need a break.
We need a buffer. We were thinking of doing the Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray next, but given that some of it is similar to the subject matter in The Coddling of the American Mind, it's like we need a buffer in between the two. So we might do a fiction in between.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll chat about it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun last night. So thank you everyone for participating. Keri, you shared an article. Can I show everyone the headline that you shared? And
please.
It is it's such a beautiful. I mean, how woke can you get? Phill Cassey says, "Why I'm not applying for a promotion." Phill Cassey outlines one proactive step to support diversity in his workplace. Phill Cassey is a conservation biologist at the University of Adelaide in Australia, and this is from Nature magazine. And Keri, let me just ask you the obvious question first. Will this get Phil laid?
Well, I don't know. He might already be getting laid. This is just I see what you're saying there. This is a reproduction strategy, right? Or this is
I think so.
A getting laid strategy.
Apply for promotion so that women can get promoted.
Here's what I think it is, and this is what I wrote when I shared it. Gross. Alternate title. I'm not applying for a promotion because I might not get it, and I'd rather write this long virtue signaling piece about sacrificing something I didn't get yet in order to garner praise and attention. Also, women need extra help, and because I'm a white man, I have a huge responsibility that others don't. Right. He says that at the end. He talks about his big responsibility because he's a white man. How racist and sexist can you get?
Yeah, he does. I mean, the gist of the article is basically, it's a short one, but the gist is basically like, it kind of exactly like you said. It's, I'm not going to apply for a promotion because women don't get promoted enough and there's too many men. And so look at the sacrifice I'm making, ladies, for you. Yeah. And which, by the way, is pretty arrogant also because it assumes that he would get the promotion over you. So yeah. I'm much better than you. So if I applied for the promotion, you ladies wouldn't get it. But don't worry. I'll step back and let the women get the promotion. So, yeah.
It's really upsetting. This idea is so prevalent on the left, and it's not liberal. This is not a liberal idea. This is very sexist. He even talks about in the piece, and he's happy about these positions where you can only apply if you're a woman. And I'm like, that is so sexist. No, women don't need your charity, and they certainly don't need to be second guessed when they get into these positions on why did they get here? Was it because they're a woman? Like, that sucks. That really sucks. You are making everything worse for women, Phill Cassey, whatever your name is. You make it worse. It's like counterproductive to what you claim to be doing.
Yeah. But may in fact be an excellent beta reproduction strategy. I don't know. Yeah, it reminded me actually of that other thing that you and I think you saw this on Twitter. Claire Lehman from Quillette posted this.
Oh gosh, this is awful.
Right. It says actual slide at a conference for science teachers in the U.S. state of Washington. So this is up in Washington. And the slide says, for those listening, our responsibility with data. That's the title. And the text on the slide says, if you conclude that outcomes differences by demographic subgroup are a result of anything other than a broken system that is, by definition, bigotry. And then bigotry's definition here is racism, classism, sexism, etc. It's not a joke. This is the slide. So they're saying if you don't ascribe to the sacred univariate cause that we've said is the cause for everything, you are a bigot. And this is science teachers. This is what science teachers are being told.
That's insane, because science is supposed to be, you're looking for truth. You're not looking for something to validate your ideology, which is, that's what this says. Hey, if there's any disparity, like if you look at, and by the way, they don't apply this across the board, as we talked about. They don't believe in universal principles. They don't look at the fact that most garbage collectors are men and say, well, that's as a result of sexism against men, you know, or that most occupational deaths, most people who die on the job are men. They don't look at that and say, that's because men are oppressed, you know, and if you decide anything else, then you're a bigot, you know?
So maybe this is a good time to remind people of something. I'm going to, this is my crappy bell curve diagram. Can you see this? Or is it too bright?
Oh, great. Are we going to do bell curves now?
I think we should, just for a minute.
Okay, yeah.
So there is an IQ distribution in any population, and it generally looks something like a bell curve. And from my understanding, men and women, actually, if you draw their bell curves, I've exaggerated this a little bit, but men and women have roughly the same mean, slash also, I think, roughly the same median. I think there's some evidence that men on average are like a couple points, maybe higher, but that's not even totally clear. So let's assume it's the same. It's roughly the same, okay? That's the IQ. However, men have much more of a variance, which means there's much more variability in men's IQ. This is science, by the way, science teachers in Washington. There's much more variance. So women have a much tighter bell curve and men have a much wider bell curve. So if you look at this graph, this inside bell curve would be women and the outside bell curve would be men. Now, this means basically nothing if you meet someone on the street. You have no idea where they are on any of these bell curves, and you can't predict anything about any individual based on their sex. However, let's say that you just cared about homeless people, and homeless was correlated to really low IQ. So let's just draw a line here and say all this stuff these are all homeless people. Well, if you look, it's basically all men that are that low IQ. There's a maybe tiny bit of women. It's almost all men in that extreme, because only men have those extremes of that low IQ. Feminists don't care about that. They don't want to talk about the fact that homeless people are mostly men. But they do care about, if I draw this little line on the other side, and we say this side, these are the high IQ, you know, scientists, I don't know if you can see that. Scientists, that kind of thing. People that with PhDs. If you look, actually, again, it's predominantly men. There are some women in there, but at both extremes, if you look at the population at both extremes, you will see more men overrepresented. That is not bigotry. That is not sexism. That is science. I didn't invent the science. It doesn't benefit me. I don't think I'm at either one of those extremes. I'm not saying anything about me or Keri or probably most of the people you know. But if you're going to look at the extremes on either end, you will see disproportionate number of men. That's just the way it is. It doesn't mean that there's sexism.
No, and it also doesn't mean that there's no women who are on the extremes. It just means on average, most of the extremes are going to be men. People don't get, right, and people don't get they don't get math and they don't get averages, and that's why they got so upset about James Damore's Google memo where he was talking about women and like, just because there's not 50-50 women in STEM doesn't mean that the only answer, like this slide would say, the only answer is sexism, and if you conclude anything else, then you're a bigot. Well, that's not scientific. That's not even factual. There's lots of reasons. And he was kind of going through some of those reasons. One of those reasons, and this is a very interesting stat, is women, I know we've mentioned it before, but women who are on that higher end of that spectrum, who are on that extreme end of the gifted spectrum in science and math, they usually tend to be very gifted in other areas as well, including verbal, including being able to articulate themselves well. men who are on that high end of the spectrum in math and science are usually not as gifted in other areas like women are. So the very gifted women often have more options than the very gifted men.
Right.
And
There's something about, like, I think there's a disparity in like the Raven's matrix test, which is more spatial and math based stuff. I think there's a gender disparity there, right? And also on the verbal side. In general, it doesn't mean there can't be brilliant male writers, and it doesn't mean there can't be brilliant female physicists, but in general.
absolutely, in general. And people don't understand what in general means. They don't understand like what on average means. And I think that actually leads to so many problems in conversation, because they just really don't understand averages. And it's like the stuff we talked about with trans athletes. It's like the people who say stuff like, well, I'm a woman and I can run faster than my male cousin. It's like, yeah, and neither of you are on the elite end of that bell curve, the extremes. Like, put a female track star up against a male track star and tell me that again. Like,
I mean, you can make arguments against stuff, and I'm happy to hear counter arguments. But when someone says something like that, to me, that's just a signal that they're low IQ, right? That's like, I know a tall Chinese person. Yes, they exist, but that doesn't mean that on average they are as tall as Swedes. Like, that's just the way.
Well, sometimes they're low IQ, but other times they just, they really haven't had someone explain it to them in a way that makes sense before, I think.
Maybe. I mean, I just, it's not very difficult of a concept. My 10-year-old understands the concept.
Right. All I'm saying is some people haven't had it explained to them. So I'm glad you're explaining it.
Well, there you go. That's the explanation. The other thing, which I thought you were going this direction with your last comment, Keri, but you went a different direction. Also valid. In societies in which there is more gender equality available, like where men and women, there's more actual gender equality, you tend to see women actually self-selecting along different lines. Like, they don't actually want to be doing as much STEM as men. You actually end up seeing in societies where there is more gender equality, you actually see a larger gap between the desires of men and women, what they want to be. All things being equal, the genders don't always choose the same career paths. So that's the other factor. One of the things that bothers me the most about this kind of stuff is it completely erases any form of agency from the, quote, marginalized groups or marginalized individuals. It says, oh, marginalized individuals aren't represented here. The only reason, like, they couldn't possibly not want to be represented here. They must not have any agency. They must want the exact same thing that white males want, because that's the thing that everyone wants. Like, don't take what white guys want and apply it to every other group. Not everyone is a white guy. Maybe not everyone wants the same thing. Maybe some groups want different things. Maybe there's preferences, and maybe that's not racist. Maybe there aren't, but it's like, there certainly is evidence that there's preferences, at least among the sexes.
Well, that does actually relate back to the point I made in a way, because it, like I said, those women who are highly gifted in STEM are highly gifted in other areas, and so they have more options. And yes, that's the whole point, is that a lot of those women who are highly gifted in math are also highly gifted in other areas, and they're choosing those other areas.
Right.
Who wants to choose? I mean, some women do, of course, but it's totally understandable that a woman who's highly gifted in a lot of different areas may not want to choose to sit in a lab, 12 hours a day, when there are other things that she could be doing that she might find more interesting. And I don't know, women tend to self-select, like you're talking about. This is what women and men tell researchers. This isn't an observation. This is what people say about themselves. Women self-report that they enjoy working with people and animals more. On average, women say this. Again, men on average enjoy working with things more. That's just,
and I think there's actually evidence from this. I think they've done studies with both baby monkeys and baby humans. Human males, their gaze will stay transfixed on objects more than people, and for females, it's people more than objects. I don't know if it's objectively objects more than people, but if you compare the males to the females gaze will be on humans longer than the males. The males gaze will be on objects more. And that's not, this is pre, quote, social constructionism, radical leftists. This This isn't gender as a social construct. This is right out of the birth canal, right? This right away. There's a brain difference. We know there's brain differences. We know those brain differences are related to big five personality traits. Jordan Peterson's talked about women being higher in neuroticism and higher in openness, right? I think maybe even higher in agreeableness. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But there are differences on average between men and women. So yeah, it doesn't say anything about what Keri in particular wants. You can't make a judgment about an individual or what I want. But certainly, if you're going to start looking at, large swaths of the population and start deciding, what percentage of what sex should be doing what thing, you've got to take that into account.
Yeah. Well, the monkey study you're talking about is rhesus monkeys, and the male monkeys, the baby monkeys, the male monkeys prefer to play with, when they gave them both kinds of toys, prefer to play with trucks and things with wheels and dumpers and dump trucks. And the girl monkeys like to play with the dolls and with the trucks. It was actually, they found more of a very specific with the male monkeys, particularly did not like to play with the plush, like the dolls and stuff.
I think I'm not totally sure about this, and because my data is old. The last time I read a book about this in neuroscience was quite a long time ago. But I think, and it'd be great if someone knows if this is true, but I think there are more connections between hemispheres in the female brain on average. So men end up being more kind of compartmentalized and actually, I think, focus a little bit more, and women on average kind of can survey disparate things more, right? So there's like more variety of interests there and less focus. I'm not totally sure, but that's my understanding.
Well, I just looked it up as you were talking.
Oh, great.
Male brains have more connections within hemispheres to optimize motor skills, whereas female brains are more connected between hemispheres.
Okay, so I was right about that. Okay.
Yeah, to combine analytical and intuitive thinking.
Right. Which makes sense why the female monkeys would be like, well, dolls and trucks are both interesting, but the male monkeys are like more OCD about the trucks. Right? So, I mean, that makes sense. So go ahead, Keri. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to share something to go back to that original article about like,
yeah.
Hey, ladies, I'm going to give up my promotion that I haven't gotten.
I'm surprised he didn't send his like this, and here's my Tinder profile.
Right. It's not necessarily about, I know what the joke you're making, and I totally agree. Some men use this to get laid, but it's not even necessarily about that. It's just about the kudos and the virtue signaling. It's about the praise. It's like the Pharisees in the Bible. A friend of mine pointed this out. It's true. I call the Pharisees are like the ones who pray on street corners. They're like the original virtue signalers, Yeah. Like, look at me praying. I am here. That's what this article is. Like, I'm giving up this. Aren't I wonderful? Like, it's just like, what? And by the way, this article, I was thinking, I would really like to tell him where he can shove his ego that he refers to as his privilege and his responsibility, but it's his ego. And then I realized on this particular article, which isn't the case usually nowadays, that has a little email link. You can email this righteous author and tell him what you think. Don't be mean. I'm just saying you can tell him what you think. But I wanted to share this because it made me think of this. This is a Thomas Sowell quote. Activism.
I love Thomas Sowell, by the way. So good, so often.
He has so many great quotes. Yeah. Activism is a way for useless people to feel important, even if the consequences of their activism are counterproductive for those that they claim to be helping and damaging to the fabric of society as a whole. That's what this guy is. He doesn't care that the consequences of what he's pushing is actually counterproductive for women and does not help women. It doesn't help women for people to think that any of our accomplishments we've gained because we're women and because there were slots set aside for us and because men weren't allowed to apply for those slots and because men like this guy had to virtuously give up their promotion so that we could get ahead. Like, that doesn't help women at all. That sets women back. You suck. This guy sucks.
Well, look, I know that you're like, I get the joke you're making about sex. I think even the applause fundamentally is related to the desire for sexual status, right? The
Maybe,
laws,
yeah.
it's all related psychologically. It's just he just wants to elevate himself and differentiate himself among other men. Now maybe he's gay,
Yes.
but whatever. I think that's kind of the drive. But it reminds me of Keri. I looked at this morning because I knew we were going to talk about this article. I think this was before you were involved, or maybe right as you were getting involved in Unsafe Space. It was the 6th episode I did. And,
I know which one you're talking about.
yeah, it was the presentation from Dr. Alessandro Strumia from CERN, who got in a lot of trouble for actually trying to use reason to analyze, quote, gender bias in the sciences. And so he's a theoretical physicist at CERN, and he put this presentation out, and I basically just walked through the presentation. It's always funny to look. I'm like, ooh, I was weird looking a year ago, and what an idiot! What a stupid show that was.
What?
But anyway, I'm very self-critical. But
Oh, come on. Yeah, you weren't.
can go see it. I'll put the link below. But again, he walks through. He cites. He looks through citations. All the claims about bias. He walks through and tries to figure out whether there actually is bias. And I think it's a good presentation to see if you're interested in a truth-based inquiry into bias in the sciences, because this is a truth-based, not a virtue signaling-based inquiry. And of course, he was skewered for it. But
What was that point you made about it once? Where it's like all the women are choosing to go into gender studies and critical race theory,
right?
And then they're like,
yes.
Go ahead. Why aren't there more women in STEM? We need to go into STEM now that we've got our degrees in gender studies. We need to go into STEM now. And like, what? You chose gender studies.
Yeah, I think that was actually a comic strip that he might have it might be in that presentation. I don't remember. I didn't watch the video again. I think it might be in that presentation, or there's a comic strip of like exactly that, right? Women arguing, more women in STEM, more women in STEM. And it's like, well, what'd you major in? Gender studies. It's like, well, look, if you majored in gender studies, why are you complaining about women in STEM? Like, go into STEM. But yeah, a lot of the complaints are people from non-STEM fields complaining about the lack of representation in STEM.
And then they go in, and that's why the sciences are changing now, and that's why you see crap like that slide you showed.
Well, but they don't really go in, right? They go into they make the parallel fake sciences. So like,
that's what I mean.
I can't.
But they're ruining
astronomy,
them.
But we'll do feminist astronomy.
They'll do feminist astronomy, but they're ruining them, and they're getting degrees, and their degree says astronomy, and they're not astronomers. They are feminists masquerading as scientists.
Right.
That makes me so angry.
Right.
Be a scientist. Don't go in there and try to change it and turn it into gender studies and call it science.
And think about the long-term effect of this, where like you build a bridge, it falls down, and someone's like, what happened? Oh, well, it turns out she was a feminist engineer. Like, yeah. She didn't have, I thought she had a degree in engineering who designed the bridge, but it was a feminist engineer. So, it's not, if you want to be an engineer, be an engineer. You want to be a scientist, be a scientist. But there's no such thing as feminist astronomy. Maybe there's feminist astrology, though. I'm not sure. Maybe you could major in that. Anyway, I don't know. That's all I have to say about this. What about you, Keri?
We can do a short coffee today. We did, book club last night. I think this is good. Let's just, Phill Cassey, you suck. And you're
very upset. You're very mad at him. I just think it's funny. You're very pissed off.
Yeah, you suck because you're claiming to do something virtuous on behalf of women, and you're setting women back. And we don't need your sexist charity, and we don't need people second guessing us because of, I'm trying not to name call, because of people like you, chauvinists like you, and any women, any misguided female SJWs, and there are some of them on Twitter who are like, yeah, Phill Cassey. Those women, mark my words, wouldn't get anywhere were it not for positions that were set aside for women, because they don't deserve to be in those positions. And that's why they're happy. They're excited because they're like, I might get something now because of my sex, not because I deserve it. Those women suck too.
Often the people who are actually in positions where there's set-asides but they're already in them when the set aside is created, often they end up opposing the set aside because it's their degree means something right now because
Yes.
they earned it really. And now it's going to dilute the value of that degree, right? Or that position or whatever it is. Yeah. I mean, think about it from this is the other, I've talked about this before, but like, just think about it in terms of like college, right? I know this is not acceptance to college. This is a promotion, but think about it in terms of acceptance to college. So you're an employer someday and you've got two candidates coming from the same school with similar backgrounds and similar grades. Normally you would think that those should be reviewed equally. You should like look at each as an individual, right? But if you know that like, oh, the standards for this one were lower to get into that college and everything was easier for that one, it's going to be, you'll have to work consciously quite a lot to fight the bias against the person that the standards are lowered for. Like, you're going to assume that since the standards were lower, they're not the same, and they might actually be better than the person for whom the standards weren't lowered. You don't know, but because their standards were lower, you're going to assume that they're probably on average not as good as the person whose the standards weren't lowered for. So, you're going to be like, well, I'll choose the Asian person who I knew it was really hard to get into Harvard rather than the Latino person who I knew it was easier for them to get into Harvard. And, the Latino person might be better, but you're going to have a natural inclination to favor the Asian person simply because the standards are different. It hurts the Latino person.
It hurts. Well, that's what I'm saying. This hurts women. This hurts women. And setting aside positions that only women, it hurts women. For that exact reason. That's why I'm angry. And then if you go for those positions and you get them, and now every person is second guessing that you got it because of your sex.
Right.
Screw that. Just make merit. How hard is this to comprehend? Make everything based on merit. I don't want to miss out on something because I'm a woman, and I don't want to get it because I'm a woman. Go F yourself, Phill Cassey.
Yay, Keri. Can we end on that rant? That was awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, Keri. That was a great rant. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We will return tomorrow for some more Kofefi, and if you're lucky, Keri will also be livid about whatever it is we're talking about tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow for another exciting episode.